Spoilers for episode 3. I've done reviews of episodes 1 and 2. They're in the description below. Now, anyone that's ever used the excuse of the previous episodes that, oh, look, no, they couldn't do this well because they just didn't have enough time. Of course they had to cut all of the major plot points. Of course they had to cut major characters from the TV series. They had to do it. They only have 8 episodes. They don't have enough time. Well, episode 3 completely disproved that point. This episode is entirely just obsessed with itself. This is an indulgence of the writers because this isn't the Wheel of Time. None of this happened in the books. This is literally an episode where they tell their own stories just under their brand. I don't know what this is, but it's basically fan fiction. And I know in an interview that they've done, he's gone, oh, well, you know, I asked all of the people when I first took over the role, what don't you like about the books? I'm like, that's not your job to ask that question. Your job in this TV series isn't to fix the books. I don't care if you like it. I don't care if someone else has an opinion that they don't like it. You do not change it. Your only job is to faithfully represent the books on the full screen. And in this episode, they haven't done it. They removed major characters, which have a knock-on effect for our main characters, and instead they've rewritten other ones and merged storylines together. I can understand merging storylines together. Okay, I'm fine with that. But at the same time, on the other side, you're just waffling on in a scene for no reason, and you get nowhere. At the start of the episode and at the end of the episode, we're basically in the same place. The only changes are we've been introduced to Thom Merrilin, and we know who the Tinkers are a bit. After that, that's it. The entire rest of the episode may as well not have happened because nothing else really moves along at all. But let's get stuck into it and I'll explain why. We start where Nynaeve on episode 1 left off. She was kidnapped by the Trollocs, and now this is the perfect example of what happens when you write yourself into a corner and have no way out of it. Obviously, Nynaeve cannot actually escape from Trollocs at all. She's not a fighter, she's not strong enough, they're far more powerful than she is. So the only way she can escape is if something goes horribly wrong. And it does. You see, the Trolloc just lets her go. No, I'm not making that up. No, he literally just lets her go. Drops her hair, drops her to the ground. The literal only way Nynaeve can actually escape from a Trolloc is if he lets her go, and that's exactly what happens. And I know full well the way that the writers would explain that. And anyone that's read the books would also know that's BS, so I'm not accepting that, just like I wouldn't accept it in this. But, as you can see, the Trolloc has actually let her go to go and eat another Trolloc. Now, this happened, Trollocs hate Trollocs, but being Shadow Spawn, I'm pretty sure their tainted meat doesn't taste anywhere near as nice as humans, because if it tasted nicer, that would be a very weird thing for the Dark One to create, don't you think? If all, instead of eating humans, they just wanted to eat their best friend, bit weird. But anyway, this obviously gives Nynaeve a chance to just run away, and she does, which is good, because she wouldn't be able to fight, and so she shouldn't fight. We know that, and that's exactly what the show has. So Nynaeve runs away through the forest for a while until she gets to the Women's Circle cave. And so far, I like all of it. She's run away, she's hid, she wouldn't be able to fight, so she does what she should. Now, I'm a bit concerned about it, the fact that she's literally visible, and the Trolloc doesn't see her, just floating in the water. Bit weird, but anyway. Later on it comes on and you think, okay, you just go under the water, you're safe. Go under the water, safe, fine. Don't fight it, you can't fight it. Fighting it would be stupid. Just hide. And she does, and it's good. Of course, her issue is that Trollocs have a great sense of smell. So he starts smashing about in the water with its spear. I will find you. I know you're in here. I'm going to find you. I'm not being funny, but she literally emerges out of the water like a centimeter at a time, out of something like a movie. I'm sure I've seen this scene before. I'm not sure if it's in Predator or just a British military advert, but I have seen this almost second for second happen with trained SAS soldiers or something like that. This is stupid. But don't you know, obviously, Nynaeve, the little town medic with no actual formal warrior training, she can do this. She literally grabs its sword and slaughters it. I mean, Tam couldn't even handle one Trolloc, but Nynaeve in a pool, well, that's just an altogether different level of power. Trollocs, no problem for Nynaeve. She can handle as many as you throw her. As long as she can hide in water, she's a god. And needless to say, none of that happened in the books, but that is a sentence you're going to be hearing a lot in this video. Now, I did actually like that first scene to a point, right up until she randomly jumps in the pool and slaughters him like an SAS agent, but we end up back where Nynaeve is with Lan, if you remember from episode 2. And it starts off weird, because she asks Lan where are her friends and are they alive? Because as far as Nynaeve knows at this point, everyone left voluntarily with Moiraine and Lan. And unlike the books, Nynaeve doesn't actually think that the Aes Sedai are evil. She doesn't think they're dark friends. As far as she knows, they actually saved the world. And so, combine those two things. She knows that people left voluntarily, and as far as she knows, Aes Sedai are actually good people who save the world and help people. Sure, they may have turned away her old boss because they were essentially didn't like peasants, but apart from that, that's the only motivation she's got. So let's see if that explains her future actions. Now, I do like that even with a sword on his neck, Lan only cares about, how did you track me through the forest when I'm trying to hide it? This is a man who could knock over walls just by these balls alone. And Lan says he left Rand and everyone else, and that's not true at all. He didn't leave them. The deadly darkness came and started killing everything, and so he ran away because they had to. They got separated. There's a difference. Now, in the books, Moiraine was the one that actually left them because she was conscious at that point, and she wasn't even that bothered. It was like the wheel weaves as the wheel wills. This is clearly meant to happen, and although she was concerned a bit, she never actually blamed to go around. But now, of course, everything's Lan's fault. There's no reason for it. It wasn't written down, but we've got to blame the men. And the weird thing is, this only seems to be done. All of these changes just seem to be done so we can have Nynaeve and Lan duel for a bit. Now, Lan tells Nynaeve that the Dark One is after your friends. You want to help your friends, and Moiraine can, but she can't move. She's weak, and you're a healer, you can help her. And as far as Nynaeve knows, there's no reason to disbelieve them. She knows they went voluntarily, and she knows that they defended the village from Trollocs. As far as she's concerned, they should be amazing. They just may not like her accent. So it's even weirder then, where she's like, I'm not going to help Moiraine. I'm not going to save her. I mean, I am a medic, and that's literally my job, but I'm not going to save this vulnerable person. Why would I help her? What happens next is the strangest writing I've ever seen. Lan actually has to horse trade with her, going, you will help them. If you will help Moiraine if you actually want to help your friends. And there's no reason for Nynaeve to disbelieve any of it. In the book, she thought the One Power was evil. In the book, she thought Moiraine was evil. But not in this, and this is what we're supposed to go off. So the next thing really doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Because Lan calls a bluff, he says, you're not going to stab me, and that's perfectly reasonable to think, because he's done nothing to her, they've only tried to help her friends, and she has no reason to disbelieve him at all, and she just goes to stab him in the neck! This is Nynaeve, is now a cold-blooded murderer. That's the only thing she cares about. She doesn't care about anything else, she doesn't care about helping her friends, she doesn't care about helping a weak, vulnerable person on the floor, she's a medic who doesn't want to heal anyone. No, she will murder an innocent person which has done absolutely nothing to her or her friends, and she has no reason to, and she will slaughter him in cold blood. Or at least try to, because obviously Lan's just far more skilled than she is, and very easily handles the situation. But it doesn't stop the fact that her entire motivation makes zero sense for what she's actually done. She's actually tried to kill an innocent person who she has no reason to even dislike, let alone anything else. I don't know about anyone else, but if somebody didn't accept me into something because they didn't like my accent, that probably doesn't give me reason to stab them in the neck. It's just my morality. Who knows? Maybe I'm the one in the wrong. Even Lan's like, oh, you actually tried to kill me. Like, yes, nobody could possibly have seen that coming because it literally doesn't make any sense. And this could only be written by someone who knows none of the characters and none of the books. Now, Rand and Matt are up a hill and they're discussing what to do. Should they go back? Should they not? And he's like, oh, well, I'll do it for Egwene. Yeah, why would Rand have a personality of his own? Why should he do it for his own reasons? I mean, they've only been told that the literal Dark One is after them. They've been having bad dreams that show that he's definitely focusing on them. And they'll probably need some help to actually just survive. Their entire village has been destroyed, or would have been destroyed if they stayed. But no, we should probably go back home. That sounds like a good idea. Okay. Yes, I mean, despite all that, despite everything, the only reason he doesn't go back home is because of Egwene. Right. I mean, she did dump him in the other episodes, but, why would you take that into account? Although it does have my favourite line of the episode in it, where Matt's like, we don't even know how to get there. And Rand says, all roads lead there. Matt's like, that's not how roads work. It's a good line. It's a good line. Well written. Good job. Now, the next is reminiscent of the books. But again, they changed something. And what they changed is worse. Perrin's struggling to make a fire. And Egwene just uses the One Power to light it. And Perrin's just like, well, can you use some magic to get some food and water? And he's all fine with it. It's completely different than what actually happened, where Perrin turns up and Egwene's already got a fire there. So Perrin assumes, and they go on, and then later he asks her for a flint, and it turns out she lost it way before, and she's been lighting fires with the One Power. Now, at this point, Perrin still believes the myths that the Aes Sedai and the One Power are dark friends and evil, and so he's taken aback, and he's not really sure, but he's like, okay, Egwene, you're my friend, and so I'll trust you with it. It's a good moment, and it shows that there's sort of personal growth going on there. Rather, he doesn't just accept it and go, oh, okay, that's fine. He's still taken aback. He's still not sure if he likes it. He's still not sure if she should be messing with it. But in this, no, we'll just all accept everything, because everybody should be accepted for everything they do or believe, no matter whether they're supposed to be evil or not. By doing it out in the open, you're just showing that Egwene is just full on with it. She's just like fully committed to the One Power now. She's not actually like, no, maybe I should keep this a secret. And Perrin just openly accepts it, and it's not how it should happen. Neither of them know what they're messing with, and Perrin, certainly, being the sort of slow, careful thinker that he is, shouldn't just be this accepting of new ideas. Should have to weigh things through first, and it's all a bit too, quick. Welcome to the epitome of based. Yes, Lan actually just ties Nynaeve to a tree. Awesome. I don't know who thought this up. This isn't in the books either. Basically, none of what's happened so far has been. But this is a great bit of writing. This is definitely Lan. If you mess about with him, he'll just tie you to a tree and gag you. I really like this. Now, when Lan talks to Nynaeve, he says, you know, are you ready to help her now? And she's like, if I help her, she better give me the answers that I want. He's like, are you really in the place to give demands? It's not a demand, it's a threat. Why are you threatening these people? You've got no reason to threaten these people. As far as you know, they defended your village, and then your friends went off with them voluntarily. Now, presumably by this point, Lan would have actually told her what's happened in Shadar Logoth. You'd assume so. But even if he hasn't, that's probably a question you'd ask first. She has no reason to think these people are evil, no reason to think there's any harm done to them. The only thing she's seen is that these people help. And all of this stems from the fact in the first episode they didn't want to show Aes Sedai as having a bad reputation, and from that, every single character arc has been completely destroyed because none of them think the One Power or Aes Sedai are evil. So when you show Nynaeve acting like this, it comes across as her problem because she has no reason to believe it. Bizarre. So she threatens to let Moiraine die again for absolutely no reason whatsoever and goes off eventually when Lan actually releases her to go and gather herbs. And she's like, and she starts giving Lan lip again. No reason whatsoever. It's like, you go on and ask. And he says, how did you track me through the forest? She's like, well, you can ask, but I'm not going to tell you. It's like, what? In the book, she just tells him and goes, yeah, I tracked you. He's like, what, you tracked me? She's like, yeah. And he was impressed. That was the beginning and the end of it. But in this, no, you haven't seen me. I can be better than the man. I'm not going to tell you how I tracked you. I mean, literally, you just followed his tracks through the forest. It's not a magic trick. It's not difficult. It's not complicated. It is impressive because Lan's very good at hiding tracks, which is why Lan's impressed. But there is no reason to act like this to him. It's not going to get you anywhere. And every single person on Earth would be annoyed by this. I don't know whether this is meant to be her getting one over on him, but really, fail. Now, one scene I did really like was the Perrin dream sequences. We don't really see Perrin's dreams or hear them talked about that much, and dream sequences in any television show will be difficult because they're so out there and bizarre. But in this, they do a really good job. We get to see the character with the red eyes, there's lightning, there's wind, and there's a wolf eating his dead wife. It's creepy, it's atmospheric, and I think it's absolutely on point. If you want a very creepy dream sequence, you got it in this one. Getting that kind of atmosphere, I think, is one of the more difficult things to do, but in this, they nailed it, and I'm very happy with it. But then we skip to Perrin and Egwene getting chased by wolves, and this is about the point where I think I should say, never happened again. The Lan Nynaeve conversation didn't happen at all. The dream sequence didn't happen. The starting bit with Nynaeve didn't happen. That's basically the entire thing I've showed so far, and this is just added to the list. The issue with this one is they've cut out one of the major characters from the books, and this character has major plot development points, and he really helps the characters. And I don't want to get into too much spoilers, but as far as I can find out, this character hasn't even been cast for the show. It just seems like he's removed. So while I'm not going to spoil anything that hasn't happened in the show, or we haven't passed by chronologically, cutting this guy out, and it seems like they've cut him out from the show entirely, really really affects the story, really affects Perrin's character arc, and we get this instead. They're just herded by wolves where they need to go. Talk about a disappointment, and it really, really affects this episode, especially when you look at the rest of the episode as a whole, and you're like, none of that needed to happen because it didn't happen in the books. You've now cut out an entire section and a character from the books, which should have existed and really affects one of your main characters, and you didn't even want it in. You spend less time waffling on with Lan and Nynaeve, and more time actually having bits in your episode that actually existed. This was your opportunity, and instead, we just get people herded by wolves. I did say in my episode 2 review that I hope that's not the introduction to the wolves, because it looks like they've cut out a major character, and 3 just confirmed my worst suspicions. Welcome to the Four Crowns, a degenerate place where everyone is after you and no one is safe. This isn't where the wealthy end up. This is a town of degeneracy and debauchery, where everything just seems a little bit off, a little bit weird, and you probably don't want to spend time in it too much. And they do give you a good sign of that straight off the bat when they have a dead man in a cage. I don't know many towns with a dead man in a cage hanging above them, but if I did meet one, I certainly wouldn't be going in it. But the Rand and Matt, they have different ideas. They see that and just march straight on in because, I don't know, these are meant to be incredibly young, naive farm boys. You'd think that a sign like that says keep out would really keep them cautious. But in this, no, even the sign of a rotting corpse isn't enough to keep them out of a town. Now, as far as canon's concerned, this story that we're about to get is probably about 3 different storylines all merged together into one and twisted just to make it fit. And especially considering the rest of the waffle we've had in the episode, I think it's less off for it. I would have preferred the original, because we could have had big set pieces and impressive action, and instead what we get is a barmaid. And it's not so much the barmaid, this is an actress from The Outpost, which I actually really liked. It's her story and what they tried to do to her, because it just doesn't work in the Wheel of Time. It doesn't matter how much you try and do it or what you try and write. You can't do what they tried to do, and it just falls flat. Because first, we're introduced to Thom Merrilin, a guy who was actually right in the Two Rivers at the start, and I do think that this is a character with enough complexity and depth that he should have been with them from the start. This is a man who's skilled at fighting. He's a gleeman, and so has a really bright-coloured patchwork cloak, like all gleemen do. Gleemans entertain. They're good with songs and juggling and know loads of stories that they tell to other people, and they essentially sing for their supper. Literally. The issue is in the Wheel of Time, they're half singer and storyteller and half just court jester. This is why they have a bright-coloured cloak, so people know them, and they're recognised by it all over the place. It's meant to be garish. But I don't know if you can see, there's no patchwork cloak here. It doesn't happen. He's in a dark cloak for no reason. This guy just looks like anything else, and I can only assume it's because they're trying to go for this really dark and seedy look in the Wheel of Time. That's not what the books were. Yes, there was darkness. Yes, there was grit to it. But there was also incredible brightness, incredible colour. There were good parts as well as bad. And so far in this, everybody just seems dark and evil. They don't really show any of the good and brightness. Everything is just tainted in a way. And when it comes to his cloak, that's not a gleeman's cloak. Now, the show does at least nod to this. As you can see in this, they actually do have the patchwork cloak, although it's really not that bright, but it's there on the inside. Now, you have to remember, these are entertainers. They went around and they were meant to be recognised and entertain and get people excited for the show so they could draw people in. It's not much use on the inside of your cloak. Nobody can see it, nobody can tell. So, in a way, they're like, okay, we didn't want to show that, but we're going to give a nod to the fans anyway, and in doing so, have completely eradicated the entire point of having that cloak in the first place. I do have to say, though, that Tom's performance is really good. I think his song is really good. And just from an effort perspective, they probably didn't have to create their own songs and stuff for it, but the guy's got a good voice. Despite this, though, despite as good as his voice was, he just sings one song and walks off. And the entire inn is just like, what's happened here? I mean, Gleeman was supposed to draw people into the inn. They were supposed to entertain. And then in return, they get paid and they get the bed and board paid for and everything else. And that's how they travel around the world. But in this, no, he just sings one song and walks off. And nobody says anything or does anything. He's like the worst gleeman ever, when he's supposed to be one of the best. He's supposed to be incredibly talented, and he can't even entertain a crowd for more than one song at a time. It's weird, and it's not how Thom would act. In fact, none of this is really how Thom would act. This doesn't even seem like Thom at all. Little series of events. This guy bumps into Matt and steals his coin purse, and then Thom steals it back and sits down with the lads. And then there's a little back and forth. Thom says, "Are you going to tip me?" Matt says, "No, we're too poor." So Thom tips himself out of Matt's own money right in front of him, which would be cool. That is Thom's character. That's as playful as he'd be, and it would teach him a lesson. Except he keeps the coin purse afterwards like some kind of basic thief. That isn't Thom. Thom was a decent bloke. He wasn't a thief. He would work for his money, but not in this. Now, Thom is apparently just as bad as everybody else. This is what I mean about they want this dark, seedy attitude where you can't trust anybody. It's like even his cloak isn't colourful, just like his personality, which would be fine if this was your own actual IP. But when this is somebody else's and you're completely changing the characters, it doesn't work, and to be quite honest, you should show them more respect. Back to Perrin and Egwene, and this time they've been herded by the wolves to some tracks. Yes, this has been a very entertaining thing that certainly didn't happen in the books, because while we could have had an extra character learn more about the Wheel of Time, more about the environment and Perrin himself, we could have even had a great chase and avoiding the Dark One. Now we've skipped all that and we're just being herded to some tracks. I mean, I'm sorry, all of that got replaced by Moiraine being ill and Nynaeve trying to murder Lan for absolutely no reason whatsoever. But I hope you're happy with the replacement, because this is what you've got. Back to the bar, and Rand and Matt are saying, look, can we just have free bed and board, or at least Matt is, because then Rand chirps up and goes, we'll even work for it. And Matt really doesn't like that idea. He doesn't want to work for his money. And it's not Matt. This might be the degenerate, useless waste of space Matt that we've got here. But in the books, that's not Matt. Matt was a prankster, not a prat. But at least it does actually stay with the characters that we've got in the show, I guess. And it would be very Rand in the attitude of this. So Rand goes out and chops wood, and Matt doesn't. Instead, no, we have this weird conversation about Rand and Matt about whether they want a threesome. I don't know why this is in here. Look, these boys are supposed to be young and naive. They've had no experience with women. And yet in this show, they've aged them up. And it seems like the only reason so far they've had to age them up is so they can just have threesome jokes. It's not the best idea for something, and it does obviously innately change their characters. And quite honestly, I think you would have just been better off with the younger, more naive farm boys that they're meant to be. But Matt goes back in and he talks to the barmaid, and if you're wondering why I'm calling her the barmaid and not Dana, which is her name, it's simply because I don't care, because this is a character that doesn't exist. Yes, this is another invention simply used to try and merge together things in the book which shouldn't have been merged in the first place. None of this happened, and it shouldn't have done. So for me, this character will always be known as the barmaid, because that's about as much effort as I care to give it. And the barmaid's talking to Matt, where have you been, where are you going, that kind of thing. Okay, it's all normal conversation, but then it actually starts to get into what I think is a huge mistake, and it's trying to humanize her. Oh, she goes talking about her background. Oh, I've had a really hard life. I've had no choices. None of the doors have been open for me. You'll never understand how much I've struggled throughout my life. And you're just thinking, okay, so this is just you whining. But there is a point to the whining, and it's the point at the end of it, which I really don't like. But while the barmaid's talking to Matt, there is one thing I really liked about his character, because you don't actually get to see much of him in the first books or hear him talk that much for obvious reasons. No, instead, she actually starts asking him why he wanted to do it, how you've done really well to get out of your town, and he's like, no, I really want to get back to it. I have people there, I have people that I love there, and I need to go back and protect them. It's a great little bit of his character that's revealed, and something you don't get in the books, and this is actually an improvement. So, credit where credit's due. At least half of the characters in this scene are actually decently written. Now we go back to Lan and Nynaeve, and again, didn't need to happen. They're just talking about how ill Moiraine is, and he leaves on a horse. You probably think I'm skipping over that scene, and I am, but that's about as much as happens into it. It didn't need to exist, and it shouldn't have done. Again, waffling, for no reason, for something that didn't happen. Perrin and Egwene, if you ever wanted a complex idea of various different thoughts and emotions completely misinterpreted and condensed down to something that's completely irrelevant, here's this scene for you. Because Perrin is a man, he's like, look, I'm going to go ahead and scout, you stay here, and just you be safe, and I'll protect you. That way, if there's anything dangerous, I'll be the one that suffers, and you'll be safe. And Egwene is just like, no, you don't have to do that, I'll come with you. It's like, no, I don't think you understand the point of why I'm offering to go off there. It's so that you don't die. And she's like, no, I'll come with you. I mean, she can't defend herself. She's had no formal warrior training, and there's no need for both of them to die. It's a masculine instinct to protect the woman. She's like, no, you don't have to feel guilty. I'm like, what? All of the ideas, all of Perrin's emotions, all of his masculine and manly instinct to just naturally protect the women he cares about in his life, all of that has been condensed down to, oh, you probably feel guilty about your wife dying. And it's so weird to bring this up because for the rest of the episode, he doesn't care. For the rest of episode 2, he doesn't care. And because the reason he doesn't care is because he never felt like that in the first place, because she never existed. But now, suddenly, the plot actually remembers, we should probably mention her, even though no one cares about her. But to have all of his thoughts and emotions, all of his feelings, actually condensed down to guilt? The reason why women and children get evacuated first in a disaster isn't because men feel guilty. And one of the great things about the Wheel of Time is that it was clearly written by somebody that actually understands men and masculinity, and I think one thing we've learned from this series is whoever writes these doesn't. But for some reason now, Perrin no longer cares if Egwene actually dies alongside him, and so they go off along the woods together. And no, not even going to bother scouting now, even though that's basic training that they would have been taught and trained if they'd actually met the people they were supposed to meet along their journey and been trained like they were meant to. Like the pattern was meant to teach them, so they were able to survive in the world. No, now we meet the Tinkers, and luckily, the Tinkers aren't a danger, but in this scene, it definitely gives you that impression at first, which is quite a nice twist, except these don't look anything like the Tinkers. The Tinkers are meant to be full of bright-coloured clothing, but much like Thom Merrilin, their clothing has just been changed. There's nothing really bright or anything like this. The only reason she even looks colourful is because everything else of this series so far has just been incredibly drab, dull, and boring. So even a slight hint of dull red on her actually looks colourful. But I'm going to show you on the screen what Tinkers actually are meant to look like, and it's not this. But they introduce each other, ask them about the song, which is what the Tinkers travelled the world searching for, and we get to hear again. It's supposed to be brightly coloured, really just some blue every now and again, but what are you going to do? Now, this is more obviously based on the sort of Roma Gypsies, where it's the original inspiration for the Wheel of Time, where they came from, but I'd rather you took it from the source material rather than the source of the source material. That would make more sense. And apart from this, nothing really happens with them. They drop a load of exposition about how they're hated around the world and people misjudge them for no reason. But apart from that, yeah, blink and you'll miss the Tinkers. It's not the best introduction I've ever seen. It's literally just like, hi, this is what we think of us, and bye. Back to the Four Crowns, and Barmaid is now flirting with Rand rather than with Matt. We don't know where Matt's gone. She released him an hour ago and thought he'd be back with Rand. It's a nice little hint at what the plan is, and so far we don't know, but we go through and she actually takes him into a sort of a back room, and there's a whole discussion about whether Rand and Matt are gay. Obviously never happened in the books. There's no need for it to have happened here. It's a weird kind of addition that just seems added in afterwards. Whatever. But Rand's like, oh no, obviously not. Would you like to stay for a drink? And for absolutely no reason, we revisit Lan on his horse, coming back. This is right. In the last scene we saw these, he left on his horse, and now he's back with his horse. Nothing else happens in these scenes worthy of note. And these scenes weren't even ever supposed to exist. We literally saw a man leave on his horse to arrive back on his horse for absolutely no reason, and this is the extra additions that they just had to add into the books because otherwise the books didn't make sense or something. Now, what follows is a good scene. I don't think it's a good scene with Thom Merrilin because I'm not really sure this is Thom Merrilin, but I like the scene nonetheless. Matt comes back and he's going to rob that corpse they saw earlier. He saw a jewel in it, and this is apparently some kind of compulsive thief. It's a bit weird, because that's not what Matt is, but he is in this, and that's what we're going off. Now, Thom approaches him behind, he's like, what are you doing? And he gets the dagger drawn on him. This is Matt all over. Matt was drawing that dagger on literally everybody. He couldn't stop it anyway, so that is a nice touch and a nice first instinct. But then we get into this weird scene where Tom's talking to him, and he's like, you're from the Two Rivers. And like, Matt can't understand how he knows he's from the Two Rivers. And Thom goes back to my first episode review and he says, look, it's written all over you. There's loads of things that tell you where people are from, and you're very easily identifiable from what you wear, your accent, and everything else. And this is an ongoing, recurring problem that the show will have, because you look at him and you're like, no, no, it's not obvious where he's from. And it's not obvious where any of the people in any of the towns are from, because everybody looks different everywhere. Now, in the books, obviously, this is somewhere which never had visitors for generations upon generations, as far back as anyone can think. It certainly wouldn't have looked like London. It wouldn't have looked like an international airport with people all over the world in it. You would have had one group of people, and they would have all looked the same. They would have all spoke the same. And that is what would have made people very obvious to stand out. And that was the same across all of Wheel of Time, in every area. People were very separate. They looked different, and that was why they were recognizable. Because if everyone looks different in every different area, then now you can tell where people are from. But if you change the two rivers to look like an international airport with people from all over the world in it, well, now how on earth are you supposed to tell anyone's from there? And that is the problem we have here. It's like, I can tell because you look so different than everywhere else. Doesn't, because everywhere looks like from everywhere else. I said this was going to be a problem in episode 1, and it just makes this scene look stupid. Because although this is something that would be said in the books, it would be described and talked about and thought in the books, in this, it no longer makes sense. And when you change the foundations of something, like the casting, well, now the rest of your story doesn't make any sense, because, amazingly, it matters and things hinge on it, like this moment. Now, Mat tells him he needs money, and Thom is like, okay, you came to rob the dead and you're down on your luck, so I'll let you. Except he really, really doesn't like him doing it, so he goes off and turns his back, because he actually wants to respect the dead. Of course, the issue is that if he needed money, Thom stole from him at first. He doesn't offer him to give him the coin purse back. No, I'll let you rob the dead first before I even think of giving you the money that I stole from you. It doesn't really show him in the best of light. Now, later in the scene, Mat actually shows that he's already stolen it back from him, which is a nice touch. But at this time, Thom doesn't know. Thom would rather let somebody steal from a corpse than give them back their own property that he stole from him. I don't know who that is. I don't know what character that is. But that's not Thom. But then the barmaid and Rand get together, and she makes a pass at him after going, oh, you know, I have had a hard life. I've had no choices. I don't have much choices. Oh, I'm so downtrodden. But when she makes a pass at him, because he feels a bit sad as well, he completely turns her down, and she goes to walk out of the room. But then she changes. She's like, is it my braid? Because my braid, clearly, it was just too similar. It made you think of Egwene. And this is where you realise that something's gone horribly wrong. She knows who they are, and she's actually a Darkfriend. That's right! This is a woman who has sold her soul to the devil. She is literally a Satan worshipper. There is no lower form of life in this entire universe than what she has voluntarily gone to be. No one is forced to this. This is a choice. And everything they've done before, all of the talk about how, oh no, I'm so downtrodden, I haven't had many choices, oh, I'm just really upset and I didn't want any of this, all of that is an excuse by the writers to try and humanize her. Humanize the person which has literally sold their soul to the devil. And the issue is, this is the Wheel of Time. Grey doesn't really exist. There is literally good and evil. And there is no one is more evil than the Dark One. That is pure evil, evil incarnate, and she has sold her soul to it. There is no downtrodden here. There is no excusing this. Everything they do makes their soul crumble and die. And so you're supposed to think of her as human. You're supposed to think that she's just a pitiful little girl who had no choice. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's not necessary, it's not required, and in the Wheel of Time, it's not true. The people that become Darkfriends, it's filth. But that doesn't stop the show trying to convince you that, no, actually, you should just let evil off, because it probably had a bad upbringing. And it's like, no, that's a horrible message, and that is not the message of what you should be having in the Wheel of Time. This is not meant to pander to evil. You're not supposed to forgive what is essentially pure evil, and pure evil is what she's become. At that point, there is no excusing anything. But don't worry, because this is Amazon, and this is just an excuse for a woman to beat up a man again. Yes, I mean, in the books, of course, he has been trained in sword fighting by a warder, and actually, the entire point of the wheel is to put people around Perrin who help them get to what they need to do. If you need a sword fighter, then a sword trainer will come to you, and it will prepare you in advance. If you need to learn more about the One Power, people will be delivered to you to teach them about him. We've skipped over all of the training. Lan actually had people with him that needed to survive, and he didn't even teach them self-defense skills. And the entire point of the character arc, of the character development that was at the start of the books, they had tutors, they had mentors like Thom and Lan, and they would teach them, they would get them prepared for when they went off into the world without them, in case anything happened that separated them, except it never happened here. They had their mentor, well, one of them, they didn't have Thom, who was supposed to train them, and he didn't train them, and now we're left with this, where a tiny little girl who's about 1.5 feet shorter than him, about half his weight, apparently could beat him in a fight. But Rand doesn't want to let go so easily, and so what does he do? He just knocks down the door. This is a great come down from what actually happens in the actual source material, but here we are. He knocks over a door, and she is very surprised, but not surprised enough that when he runs out, she chases him. And she actually gets Perrin and Mat together at the end. Now, you have to remember, her entire plan has been stupid at this point. She came on to Rand, and then immediately just told him she was a Darkfriend, and said she was going to wait for Mat. This means that her plan was to literally keep him in that room until Mat arrived. I mean, she could have not revealed who she was. Rand didn't know. Mat would have come back and then she could have got them both at the same time. But instead, no, she was going to sit there for hours until he appeared. She's not the brightest person because she had no need to reveal herself to Rand, but she did, and so here we are. They've run through the town, through everyone, and she just decides to start talking and in the middle of the town and tell everyone how she's a Darkfriend. I mean, no one's around as far as she knows, but they could be. And this isn't the kind of thing you talk about in public. But talk about it she does, and whine she does. Don't you understand? I've had such a hard life. My life's been so horrible and dull. You just need to feel sorry for me. I mean, I know I'm evil. I know I'm about to kill you. And I know I have sold my soul to literally the devil. But you should just feel sorry for me. I didn't have any other choice. Oh, the writing. Now, I do like the way she describes the Dark One and what he intends to do. It's quite a good description that you get here, and it's far earlier than you actually really understand in the book. So I like this. I like that description of it. But to try and use it as an excuse for her behavior is very weird. They didn't really care about anyone feeling sorry for them. No, it was done for power. And it does actually hint in this that she's doing it for power, but then we get the whining. And I just don't want the whining, or the excusing, or the attempt to try and make people feel sorry for her. But she says she summoned a fate and immediately gets what she deserves. And Thom is the one that threw the knife. This is where you find out that Thom can actually handle himself in a fight, and he doesn't care. She was a Darkfriend, and so he gave the Darkfriends exactly what they needed. He says they all need to go because a fate is coming. It makes a lot of sense, and Rand takes his sword and leaves. This is the best bit that we've had for Thom, and it's exactly something Thom would do. It's just everything else that we've seen about Thom, it really isn't. This is a guy who's incredibly smart, and he notices things, even minute details. He certainly would notice a Darkfriend in the city just shouting about how evil they are, and that's the way he'd respond. That bit's all great, but his intro and some of the introduction and how he's a thief, parts of this is Thom, but serious parts of it isn't. But then finally we have where Lan rode off to, and he finds the Red Ajar, and everything ends after it's revealed that they've captured Logain, the male channeler. And that's where it ends. And I have to say, if they just stuck to, especially Rand and Mat's story, it would have been far better. For their story, when they reach the inn, they realize they're about to be robbed. And so they go through the entire night realizing exactly what's supposed to happen. And then when they get there, a Darkfriend attacks them and through a rather impressive means escape the inn, go along, and then they meet another Darkfriend, and that's the person who tries to attack them. And I think if they'd stuck with this more impressive exit, it would have just been better overall, and then later things happen which they've also merged into the one story. But none of it was meant to excuse the Darkfriend's behavior. This attempt to humanize pure evil is wrong. It doesn't really fit, and it was never even attempted to do, and I don't know why it's done here. This is a story where there is literally good and evil. You sign up and you serve one or the other. This is something where you have to pick a side. There is a right and a wrong answer, and to ignore that, I think, it does a great disservice to everyone involved. But for the rest of it, not a lot actually happened. If you think about where you started and ended, yes, we've had Thom and we've seen the Tinkers, but everything else, what was the point? We spent so much time with Moiraine being ill, and at the end of it, she's just like still ill. And none of that actually happened. You had Nynaeve running away at the start from the Trollocs. None of that happened. And then you had Perrin and Egwene chased by wolves. And while, okay, that part of the story makes sense, that didn't happen either, because something better happened, which you've completely cut out, and as far as I can tell, haven't even added into the story, because I'm not sure you've cast the actual person. Overall, this episode was a huge weakness. If most of the stuff didn't even happen in the books, now you're just freewheeling. I don't even know what this is anymore, but it's not Wheel of Time. This is more sort of fan fiction. Oh, what happened in this part? What happened in here? Spread out, and this is kind of just what's escalated from the previous decisions, because Moiraine was never meant to be ill, so now she's ill, now they've got to find a cure. When they made one change, it knocks onto other things, and it just keeps piling on through the episodes. When they don't teach Rand how to fight, now he's beaten by a tiny little girl when he needs to be able to fight. And all of these decisions, all of these changes that they keep making, keep stacking up, and so they have to try and fix them later down the line until you end up on the third episode with an entire episode literally nothing to do with the source material. It's actually astonishing, and you spend so much time waffling on trying to fix your previous mistakes that you just waste that time. And with 8 episodes, do you really have time to waste? In episode 1 and 2, so much had been cut. In episode 3, we've had entire characters cut, entire arcs cut. And yet, we're spending so much time waffling on, we apparently don't have time for those. I just think there are so many better ways to do it, and if you just stuck rigidly to the source material, you didn't even have to write that much. You could have just made the visuals for it. But instead, that wasn't enough. Going back to the first episode where you had to just crap on the men, it was all about the women. That's led to so many other problems, because you're not allowed to have men actually trained. You're not allowed to have men which are competent. You're not allowed to have men which mentor other men. All of that had to be stripped, and now we're in a situation where a lot of the stuff just doesn't make any sense. I don't know why a 5-foot woman is beating up Rand, who is supposed to be massive. But here we are, and this is what we've got. And for me, this is just a step down from episode 2. Episode 2 actually got back to... I thought episode 2 was a step up from 1, because it got back to the text and actually showing us things from the book that we wanted to. It even took entire sections of it and put it into the TV series. But this goes completely the other way. This completely abandons them and does whatever it wants. And that just isn't the show I want to see. Well, I don't know. If you haven't read the books, this may have been a good episode. For any other TV series, this may have been a good episode. But it's not what I want out of the Wheel of Time, and that's because I want the Wheel of Time. If this had been some other fantasy series, if this had just been something which didn't have an underlying text, then I would look at this episode a lot differently, because it's still well put together, but it just doesn't follow the story that it's meant to. It doesn't follow the plot points, the character arcs, or the different beats of what it's meant to. And that, for me, will forever remain the main disappointment of this series. But for now, that's it from me. If you liked the video, press like and subscribe for more videos in the future. And let me know what you thought of episode 3 and this series down below. But for now, that's it from me. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.